Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator. I'm all about capturing and curating career and life stories as a meaningful way to celebrate a milestone moment like a big O birthday, anniversary, retirement, or graduation. And I'm at my best when curating photo books that move your memories from the basement or your phone or your computer to the coffee table, giving you and your family and friends access to these treasured memories for years to come. I also love curating and capturing life and career stories through this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? It's a series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing my friend Karl Peters, who is in my Strategic Connections group. Welcome, Karl.
Thanks for having me, Kathy.
And Karl is the creative director and designer of Bluebird Branding. We're going to pause for a moment to hear from a very happy Life Story Curator client.
My name is Eleanor Allen, and I recently finished a project with Kathy about my mother's life story. And the reason I wanted to do her life story was that she's first 91 years old. And second, we've been talking about it for years as a family. I have 4 brothers and many nieces and nephews. And we'd never gotten around to making the book. Then one day I was out with another friend who's a mutual friend of mine and Kathy's. And she showed me the book that Kathy had made about her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And I thought right then and there, this is the answer. I got to hire Kathy to get this life story finally done for my mother. So I did. And working with Kathy is just a joy and a pleasure. So first, how do you organize somebody's 90 plus years into a story that's succinct, but also very interesting? And Kathy helped guide myself and my niece and one of my brothers. I have 4 brothers. One of them worked on this project with us intensely into the storyboarding process, and then working into, okay, these are the chapters of her life we're going to work on, which we went by decade. And then for each decade of her life, what do we need? We need this many pictures and this many vignettes. And then Kathy also brought in this great idea to put in QR codes of recordings. I hadn't even thought of that, but we did several of those. Some are my mother's audio recordings. We captured some of those audio files. Some are video recordings of her telling stories of her life that we have in the book, but of course, much more detail when we have the recording. And some QR codes are also documents. So we put a link to my father's autobiography that he had written for us before he passed as well, and my grandfather's autobiography that my father had done interviewing my grandfather. So very special, and those come to life as well in the book. So I encourage you, if you have any inclination of documenting someone's life story in your life, definitely go for it. It's worth the work, and the product, in this case, my mother's story, is absolutely wonderful, and she was over the moon with joy. So don't wait, do it. Document the life of your loved ones or whatever special occasion there is, and work with Kathy, and you will have a wonderful experience.
So, Karl, before we get into what it means to be a creative director and designer, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions. So, if you would, tell us what part of the country or world you grew up and where you are in the birth order, because I think both those things really impact how you're shaped as an individual.
Sure. I grew up in the balmy Western New York area, just south of Buffalo in a small town. It's actually called West Falls. And I don't know, about a half an hour south of Buffalo, outside of Buffalo. And I grew up in a house that was built in 1820. My father refurbished it after it had gone through a fire. And I grew up with 3 younger brothers, a little bit of an age gap between them. One younger brother is 3 years younger, and then I have 2 that are 14 and 15 years younger. So there was a little bit of an age gap, but I have 3 younger brothers. So it was, and I grew up with my father and my stepmother, and yeah, it was a house full of boys on 10 acres of land with dirt bikes and snowmobiles and camping and animals in the house and animals outside. And it was we didn't have a farm, but we had animals: ducks, geese, chickens, rabbits, goats, sheep. So
Ah,
it wasn't a farm, but we had a lot of animals.
so what I gotta ask, I grew up out in Elizabeth at 40 acres, and we had cows and chickens and pigs and stuff, but they eventually got butchered and they became food at some point, for sometimes for us, sometimes for other people. But what was the point then if it wasn't a farm? Did they end up going to food stores or?
Yeah. Some did. Some were what I would call pets. We had two goats when I was real young, that were more like dogs to us than goats. We had sheep. Part of the goats and sheep was to keep some of that acreage just mowed. They did
Okay.
that. And then we had chickens that my parents, harvested eggs, and we ate chickens and geese and ducks. And we had two ponds. So part of it was just I think the family community environment, just to have the animals around, and part of it was, yeah, we used some of it for food source, but we didn't sell out or give out to the community. The other thing that's interesting about the house that we grew up in, there was 3 giant maple trees on the property, and my parents used to tap those trees, and we made maple syrup up from the time that I was 5 to the time I moved out. They boil down maple syrup every year, and they would make, I don't know, 4 or 5 gallons of syrup that we would use and share. So it was a fun part of the process. It was a lot of work, but because you're boiling down hundreds of gallons of sap to get 4 gallons of syrup. But that was something that I remember growing up with.
Yeah, interesting. So you're the oldest, all boys, sounds like everything outdoors. Was there other sports and activities that you did, or was it mostly just, that with animals, it's always about taking care of the animals, right? I mean, someone's got to take care of
Yeah, with the 10 acres of land, there was always mowing to be done. There was always, work to be done around the house. Constantly, me and my brothers, I grew up on a street that was about a mile long. And there were probably, I don't know, 20 families with children. And so all my friends grew up on that street. And then in the middle of the street, there was a church. And every single day we met at the church and played softball, football, hockey, baseball, something. So sports was always part of my life growing up. And then outdoor, I mean, I was just outdoors all the time, all the
Yeah,
time.
all the time. Well, and it sounds like the sports were not organized. You guys had to organize them yourself, right? You had to govern yourself probably, and how you picked the teams and the rules and who got to play and didn't, and etc. Right?
Correct.
So that kind of gave you a little bit of which is different than today, right? Everything today is like, okay, you got to try out for the team, here's your role, etc.
Correct. I didn't play an organized sport until high school when I played basketball. Everything up until that was church, church lot, or, behind the house in the grass. But we figured it out. Yeah, it was good. No parents were involved.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're shifting gears a little bit. Are you an introvert or an extrovert, or that third category, the ambivert, right in the middle?
That's really easy. I'm an introvert by nature. I call myself a bottler. I keep things in, probably to a discredit. But yeah, I'm definitely not an extrovert. I married an extrovert, very loud and boisterous, but no, that is one of my weaknesses, and one of the things I try to grow as, is trying to be more outgoing in regards to introducing myself to new people and making new contacts and networking that way. So definitely introverted.
Okay. Well, that gives us a little insight into the next question then. On the fun meter, of a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a couch potato and 5 being the life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the middle, I think. I'm the older I get, I feel like I'm becoming this curmudgeon, and my kids probably would agree with that, but I'm not a couch potato. I want to be active. I like being out, and I like once I get warm with people, it becomes easy to communicate, but so I'll be a 3. I'll say I'm a 3 on that fun meter. I like being out and active, but I'm definitely not the life of the party.
Okay. Nor the couch potato, right? Because it seems like what I know about you, you like to doing things, it seems like, and participating in sports and activities and coaching and
Yeah, no, I like being active. I still play basketball. I coached all my kids, and I enjoy being outdoors for sure, for sure.
okay. We're going to shift now to the risk meter. Same scale, 1 to 5, 1 to being low risk taker, 5 being high risk taker. How do you put yourself?
I'm gonna put myself in the middle again. Um, I when I first started out in my career, I took I think I was taking some continued education at the company I worked for first, and I think it was called managing interpersonal relationships was the course or class I was taking for the day, and they made you take an assessment, and I got plotted into this amiable quadrant. I think it's social styles, the test.
Ah, okay.
There's 4 quadrants, and I got put into this amiable style, and it made me mad internally. Like I was like, I'm not a pushover, but at the end of the day, yes, I am really easygoing, which is how I define the word amiable. But I didn't see it as a trait that I wanted to keep. So on a risk meter, I'm easygoing, but I also will push where I feel the right place, when it's the right time to push. And that, I do that with clients. And I just want my opinion to be heard, my perspective to be heard, and then you can do what you want. So yeah, I think a 3 is probably a good number there too. I'm not too pushy, and I'm pretty easygoing. So in the middle is good.
Well, it's funny. I love that question in particular because there's some people that rate themselves a 3 or a 4, and then we get into their story, and I'm like, that's more like a 7 or a
Yeah.
10. So I always reserve the right that I get to requalify some of these self-assessments.
Well, I would
You know,
love
it's
that.
my
Yeah, I would
show.
love to hear that.
Okay, well, Carl, tell us what it's like to be the creative director and designer at Bluebird Branding, and then we'll get into how did I get here?
So what's it like to be the creative director? So um, I don't know that my family knows exactly what I do still. Even my parents, after almost 30 years of going through at college, I don't know that they know exactly what I do. So I mean, from a standpoint of being descriptive, that title is pretty descriptive. I direct creative. What that means to me, on a day-to-day basis here at Bluebird is it's strategic, and we have clients that come to us with problems, and we solve those problems by working with words and visuals, sometimes video and sound, but and I direct that creative that comes out of that, whether it's naming a company, or doing a logo for a company, or doing a brochure for a company or client. So I direct that. It also means here that I'm actually doing some of that too. So I'm doing some of the design. So if I'm not directing it, I'm doing the design, and I mean, for the most part in my career, those are the roles that I've been doing. I'm directing, I'm leading other designers and other creative people to do something to solve a problem, and then I'm also in the weeds doing it.
Oh, okay. So you get to use the creative juices, but you also work through people to get to an end result, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's part of that whole, I love with sports and teamwork, love that collaborative process. Love it.
Ah, okay. So Carl, when you were back in junior high and high school playing in the sandlot, uh, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you think you were going to be a creative director and designer, and kind of be a partner in this business, or what was your goals?
Yeah, so I knew exactly what I wanted to be. I knew it, but I just didn't know what it was called. Um, I've always been creative. My father is very creative. His parents were very creative. And I was constantly building things, making things, and then I think it was fifth grade. There was an assignment in our class, and it was to create a cover for the directory of the school. And each student did a piece of artwork, and I just remember how it made me feel when my piece of artwork was chosen for the cover, and I was like, man, I want to do this, but I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know what it was called. I thought art was the bucket it could be called, and it didn't. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be creative and be an artist, but I didn't know what that meant until my senior year in high school. My counselor sat me down. He said, hey, what do you think about next level? And I said, hey, I'm taking this course called commercial art. I love it. Is there anything that I can do to make money in that? He's like, you ever heard of graphic design? I was like, no. And then we went down that path, and I was like, that sounds like exactly what I want to do. So
So
yeah, so fifth grade, I knew. I just didn't know it was
that
called.
is so cool. I got to tell you, you're definitely in the minority of all the interviews that I've done. I'm into the 130 some interviews, and I would say maybe 10% of all my interviews knew what they wanted to do, and then set out on a path to do it. Um, so, and I know there's a lot of steps in here that we're going to get to, but I just want to acknowledge that that's really cool. I also wanted to kind of poke a little bit on this notion of you kept using the word creative versus artistic. A lot of people will say, oh, my mom was artistic, my dad was artistic, you know what I mean? But you use the word creative. So how do you differentiate the two in a certain way?
I do. And this just my opinion, because I don't want to offend artistic people. When my father, I said, I think he's creative, and I associate creative to problem solving, whereas artistic isn't always solving a problem. And I make that delineation. Again, it's just my opinion. Because I know a lot of creative people that are very artistic, but they're not necessarily solving a problem, meaning they're creating something beautiful on paint, or creating a beautiful sculpture or ceramics, and creating something, and it's very artistic, but it's not solving a problem from the perspective of how I'm thinking about it. So I growing up with my father, he was very creative. He solved problems. We always had old dirt bikes. We had this old snowmobile that he used to have to fix. So he's always building new parts and creating new parts. And I found that to be something of inspiration to me when I was thinking about what I wanted to do. I was like, just going back to that fifth grade assignment, it wasn't just, hey, create something that's beautiful. Here's the problem. We want a cover for the directory. It needs to have these things. Give us a solution. So I always find that that's my delineation between creative and artistic. There's a lot of creative people. In college, I was in a building with fine art students, sculptures, photographers, painters, printmakers. All of those people are artistic, but they didn't always solve a problem. Sometimes it was just an expression of something. So that's how I delineate the two differences between being creative and being artistic. It's like being athletic, and then being good at a sport. I think athleticism is being artistic, and then being very good at being a hitter in baseball. I think those are the lines I'm talking about or thinking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm so glad I asked that question, because I knew there was probably something deeper there. And I think this really is going to come out more in your story. I've heard people tell their story that they're like they knew they were good with numbers, so they decided to go into math. And when they got to college, they went, "Oh, I'm not near the math brainiac that some of these other people are." So then they opted out. And so I think the same thing could happen with art, right? You go into a commercial um, commercial design, commercial art class, and then you're like, well, I'm not the most artistic one here, but you were the creative, the problem solver. You could see how all the pieces fit together. So that is a different skill set, like you said, than just and I don't want to say just then,
Yeah.
if you go down a particular path, I'm a painter, I'm an artist, I'm what have you. Yeah, more of a generalist than a specialist, but also the ability to pull it all together. So very cool. Okay, so you go to college and you do you finish college and go through all the programs and it just continues to light your fire, or what happens there?
Yeah, so I mean, when I got to college, I started to learn more about what graphic design was. I had to take all those fine art courses, and that all of those courses gave me perspective, which I look back on and I appreciate. But it also really lit my fire to your point that graphic design really was this place I wanted to be, because I saw that I could make money at it, and I saw it as solving problems. Whereas I had good friends that were illustrators and photographers and sculptors at school, and I was always thinking, how are you gonna make money? Like, how are you? And I know they had ideas on how what their path was, but it wasn't crystal for me like graphic design was. So, and then I had two great professors who are very, very different, but also came from the same Swiss design school. So I got great fundamental teaching, and from two different perspectives, and yeah, it really it lit my fire the deeper I got into it, right? Because painting I'm not a good painter, I'm not a good sculptor, but doing those things gave me great perspective on how I could solve problems in design. So I appreciated all of that. Maybe not necessarily at the time. In hindsight, I definitely appreciate it, but it stoked the fire so that by the time I was junior, senior, and really focused on design, I started to see that this passion could be something that I could do, for a living.
Yeah. So when you were in some of those classes that weren't your thing, did you ever kind of get that notion of, I want to quit, or were you able to keep your eye on the prize, so to speak, like you were saying, it's easy to look back and go, yeah, it gave me perspective. But when I was in it, I kept thinking, I can't sculpt, I can't paint, or I mean, those negative critic thoughts.
Yeah, I'm a pessimist too, but I have those thoughts. There was an assignment. I probably told you this, so I'm sorry if you got to hear it again. There was an assignment in Photo 101 where the assignment was go take photographs of this parking lot. And I thought to myself, as someone who takes things literal sometimes, okay, I'll go take photographs of this parking lot. So I went to the parking lot and I walked around it and I took photographs, and I went back, and at that time you were developing your own film, and I was in the dark room and I'm putting my prints together, and then we had a class critique where all 15 students would hang your photo, 10 photos of the parking lot up. And that was just an aha moment. And I had these same aha moments in all my fine art classes. But this photography class, it's a great illustration of it. We hung up all our photos and every student did something different, but I was the only one that walked around the parking lot and took photos that were like uninteresting. There was no focal point. I had some of my classmates got laid on the ground and took micro shots of patterns and textures and things that were in the metalwork or in the cars in the parking lot. Some zoomed in on trees in the parking lot, and some zoomed in on the buildings, and some went up on the catwalk and took photos down. And I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of all that? So that to me was an aha moment, perspective wise, but also like, oh, there's multiple ways to think about things, and my way isn't always right. And so again, I had those aha moments in my other fine art courses, but that one really, I tell that story a lot just because I think it opened my eyes to the the importance of looking at things from a different angle.
Yeah, great story. I love that. And it to learn that at such an early age, really powerful, right? I mean, and you know what? You learned it because you had to do it and go through it. If the professor had said, "Oh, and here's how you want to do," I mean, it would have been very different, right? If it had been an instruction, or if there'd been more coaching on it versus you learned it by going, "Oh, these other people just had a different way of looking, and oh, I need to look differently at things." Anyway, very cool. Very cool.
It was great that way. I learned what I think is most impressive is that I learned it right there. Like I didn't need hindsight to go, oh man, when I did that project, I really learned. I like immediately like light bulb above the head, and I was like, oh my gosh. I'm going to carry what I just learned into my other things that I do in life and my other design classes. And it was an immediate thing, which I think is the best part of the story. Because, you know, you look back on things you learn and fail at in years later, months later, but that was immediate. I was in the critique and I was just like, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. I remember I had when I was in corporate, I was pretty early in my career. I think I was a manager at the time, and we had a consultant come in and do this leadership development class or management development class. And one of the things she talked about is that there's probably 5 or 6 different ways to do things, and that your way may not always be in, so think about there's, when you do think about it and you have an idea and you think your idea is so great, think about the other ways that maybe could happen. And I remember getting that same ding, 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 going, wow, she's right. Now, part of me is, I think as a middle child, I tend to look at all kinds of options because I'm looking at all the different people involved. So I kind of have that brain thought, but I also definitely thought my ideas were the best, right? So it was a real ding, ding, ding going, okay, so this is one way to do it. Here's what's another, and if you push your team to think about different way, you're going to get to a better result, right? When you start really kind of peeling down the why. So great example. Okay, so what you finished college. What was some of your first jobs then?
Yeah, so I finished college. I got on a plane 3 days later. My professor and a friend that graduated a year ahead of me went to Texas Instruments in Dallas, Texas. And so there was a good network that was starting to be created at where I went to school. And I had applied for a position right before I graduated where they accepted me. So I got on a plane 3 days after I graduated. This is the first time I ever flew in my life. And I got on a plane with very little. My parents shoved me on, and I headed to Dallas from Buffalo, and I worked at Texas Instruments for my first 4.5, almost 5 years. And I was it was called at the time, it was called the Educational and Productivity Solutions Division, which is basically the calculators. But that was my first job. So it was a big culture shock leaving Western New York for big old Dallas, Texas. But that is one of the things I look back on. It's scary when you're 22 years old and you don't have anything to your name. All your family is in New York, but I ventured out again with full excitement because I was excited to do what I just got trained to do. And so it was scary and exciting, and it was a great moment.
Yeah. So when you get there, you don't have a car, apartment, or anything. So you've got to figure all of that out. And then also, sounds like this was your dream job. Did it feel like the dream job then, or was there kind of a little bit of a letdown after a while that it's like, oh, this now I'm not as fun as I thought, or just continued to learning and growing?
Yeah, I mean, at that moment, it seemed like a dream job, and I'm super grateful for that opportunity I had and the people I worked with. And my first boss, he's a great man. He designed the very first Texas Instruments calculator. He was an industrial designer, And man,
Which is a new career that you probably had never heard of, right?
yeah,
I mean,
well, I did hear of it. It was, it was talked about at my school, but I didn't think about it from that perspective of product design, but I considered it a dream job, and you're 22 years old and somebody starts throwing money at you, and
yep.
they start talking about profit sharing and 401ks and gym membership, and you're like, wow, this is unbelievable. And and it was great. And then as you get into the work, you start to figure out, well, these are things I do like doing, these are things I don't like doing as much. And so that, again, perspective, it's one of my favorite words, but I got great perspective, and I worked with some really, really great people. And I learned a lot in those first almost 5 years, that gave me more help in the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, and now you're in the real world too, right? And you get to see, well, what are the jobs that are out there? And like you said, what do I like? What don't I like? So, okay. So where do you go to next?
Yeah, so that, like I said, Dallas was a culture shock. I loved it being, 20 some years old, and being independent, all completely independent, no family around. So that was great. But I did realize that Dallas just maybe wasn't the greatest fit for me. I grew up camping and fishing and hiking and dirt biking, and I didn't have that sort of lifestyle while I lived in Dallas. It was hot, and it's a big city compared to where I grew up. So
So you ended up being more urban than rural, like you were.
yeah, I was in the thick of it. So I started looking for places that were, more of what I grew up in, but I knew I didn't really want to go back to Buffalo. I would love to be around my family more, but I don't enjoy the snow. I just don't. So I didn't want to be in Buffalo from that perspective. And I have this independent spirit, which I got pretty young, where, you want to prove yourself. So I had a friend that moved directly from school to Denver, and I visited him 3 or 4 times over the years. I was like, this seems like a great place. I could be out in the middle of nowhere up in the mountains in 30 minutes, or, the city of Denver's got all the sports teams and museums and everything you want. And it wasn't overly big. This is, late 1990, 99, 2000. So it seemed like a good fit. So I said, yeah, I think I want to move. And that was another big step. I was taking something that I still have. My good friend is still at TI, and I probably could have stayed and retired there if I really wanted to. So I said to myself, this is more about, about culture and lifestyle than it is about work. And I feel confident enough that I can do what I want to do in another state. So, after 5 years, you get a little bit of that confidence, which I think is really important. So I ventured out, and I actually got a job at an agency here over a phone interview. And I remember asking the principal of the agency to send me a letter, and I asked him, I said, will you send me a letter saying I'll have a job when I move all my stuff and drive to, I was like, I don't want to move out there and, like, you say, sorry, that job's not there anymore. So he FedExed a letter to me, and we packed up everything and we drove from Dallas to Denver.
Well, that was going to be my question was, did you, was there a trigger point where you're like, okay, I quit my job and then I'll just find a new one after I move? Or did you get the job first? And now you answered that, which is, and again, that's the risk taker at a 3 level. Get the job first. Others would have been like, Colorado, I'll figure it out when I get there.
Yeah, not when it comes to that. Maybe on vacation, I'll figure out where to eat or where my hotel is, but no, I needed a place. I needed that safety net for sure. So yeah, but no, he wrote me a letter, and he said, you'll have a job when you move all your stuff here. So
when you move all your stuff here. That's awesome. And so that what you said that was 99, 2000 that you moved up here to Colorado then? And
Correct. So, yeah, a big agency here branding agency in Denver. So there was an event, an event at TI that sort of was a trigger moment in that they started restructuring our design group, and started taking the designers. We were all in one group, and they started taking the designers and putting them in separate groups. Like I went to the sales group, and that's where I started to focus on packaging and point of sale and things. So they separated us from our core competency, which was design, because there were about a dozen of us who were doing industrial and graphic design. And then they started to move us around. At that time, my boss, who I'd mentioned, he was to the point where he's like, I don't want to do this restructure again. I've been through restructures. I think I'll retire. And then to me, that was a trigger point. I was like, I'm seeing some deterioration here. And I was starting to feel some of that corporate politics. And so that was the trigger point. That and the lifestyle that made me, push beyond, hey, profit sharing and all those things they threw at you are only so good. So that was the trigger point. When I moved to Denver, the agency completely different lifestyle and gave me a totally different perspective.
oh yeah, because you were at the company designing for that company. Now you're at an agency designing for multiple companies. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, in corporate, at least my experience, I didn't really track time that much. I didn't track prints and paper clips and pens and copies, and you just did your work and you worked on the projects, and you did the work and you moved on to the next thing. So I came to the consultant side as an agency, in an agency environment, and I'm keeping track of prints and every single minute that I do. And so I'm getting that perspective, but I also realized very quickly that I loved the diversity of working with different clients. Like I work on a healthcare client, and then a technology and a banking and financial client, and then maybe a trucking company. And whereas at TI, all I did was stuff around calculators, for 5 years. So that was an immediate, aha moment for me, where I was like, oh, I love this diversity. I love solving problems for everybody, not just the calculator people.
So you found again that point, you kept pointing to the things you like, the things you don't like, timekeeping, that kind of thing. But you lit up with the other stuff. So you're at a big agency then. Is that when you play through that for a while and then you decide to go out on your own? Or how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was at the agency for about 4 years. I realized there that there was a ceiling, monetary wise and growth wise, for me at that time at that agency. And there was another gentleman there too who had we were on a business trip, ready to present to a client, and he had mentioned to me in the car, he's like, hey, I'm thinking about starting my own, would you be interested in going? So this is another moment in life. I just had my son. He was not even a year old. My wife was pregnant with my second child, my daughter. And I had a steady job, but I also knew there was some financial limitations at that job. And I talked about it with my wife for a long time and thought about it, but I made that sort of scary decision to join with this gentleman, and he didn't have an office. He didn't have a big plan. He just said, hey, we got some clients and let's see what we could do. And so I was never a partner or owner of that company, but I was his first person, first employee. So it was scary, but with newborns, I wanted to be around. I wanted to have more flexibility to have to leave if a child was sick, and I just wouldn't have that. And it was a scary moment, but it was another step in the right direction for me. So I joined forces with that gentleman, and we worked together at his agency for almost 15 years, and then he
Oh,
got to
wow,
a point.
that's a
It
good
was-
run.
Yeah, it was a good run. So it was great. He got to a point where he said, "Hey, I think I want to retire." He said, you can keep the agency in the name, but you would need to, keep me included and pay me. And or he said, you can take clients and do what you want on your own. And that's another, that was what led me to where I am today.
Ah,
So
so another big risk then going out on your own, but you probably got to see more firsthand how you can go out on your own by watching him do it 15 years prior, right?
yeah, a lot of learning experience there. And I didn't completely go out on my own. So I joined with a friend who I'd worked with at those two agencies before. He had gone out on his own. He had created Bluebird. And I simply went to him and gave him the situation, said, "Hey, you know what I'm capable of, and do you want a partner?" And that's how I got to Bluebird. So it wasn't I didn't create it, but I am a partner here. There's 3 other partners, friends, and we all have the entrepreneurial spirit, but we all come from the agency background. So it's been it's great. So
Yeah. And you each bring different strengths, right? In terms of what you can then offer to your clients. So very
exactly.
cool. Well, now also the big step there was then at the partner level, right? Coming in at the partner and not at a um more of a employee level.
Yeah, that was important to me. I wanted to have a stake in something as opposed to just being that employee who had the 9 to 5. I mean, the 9 to 5 is nice, but I wanted to have a stake in something. So that was how I presented it to my friend, and he was agreeable, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah. So at any point in your career where you it sounds like kind of opportunities kept presenting themselves. Were you at a point where you kind of felt scratchy? And it doesn't sound like you've had any layoffs or firings in there either. So it's primarily it felt like you were very purposeful about how you made your decisions about changing jobs and moving on.
Yeah, I'm a loyalist to a certain extent. I mean, I wore the same kind of sneakers for almost all my life. So I'm a brand loyalist, but I'm also a loyalist
Ah,
in other areas. So I think that's one of my strengths. But I'm also, I give people multiple chances. So I've worked for 4 companies. That's it, and I know that might be rare too these days. But I gave everybody my best until I felt like that I needed something different. And I also presented everybody with options. So when I left TI, I said why. I said, I gave them my reasoning, and everybody, not every, well, everybody, again, this is only 3 times I had to do this. Everybody countered with, "Hey, can we do this for you? Can we do this for you?" And that's what made my decision even what made me feel better about my decision is that I was doing it for the right reasons. It was not a monetary thing in some cases. Or if it was, those were expressed. So yeah, in those situations, there was always a counter. There was always a good discussion. And then I felt good. I mean, I was scared, but I felt good about my decision too. So at the end of the day, there wasn't anything too scary in those regards, other than, if you're going out on your own. But I felt like I had safety nets around me, and I felt like I
yeah.
had enough
When I hear
experience.
you talk about going with these partners and these different, it sounds like there was already a client base that you could either tap into for work or referrals, etc. So it wasn't like a brand new shingle, brand new degree, brand new shingle hanging out and going, okay, I'm starting from scratch. Doesn't everybody want me? You had quite a bit of collateral or capital, I guess, in the field, right, already. So it
Yeah,
isn't
I definitely
starting
stood
from
on the
scratch.
shoulders of some other greats for sure. Right.
Ah,
You just, if I had to throw a quote out there, no, I didn't have to start anything from scratch. but that being said, I felt like I built some of the relationships with some of these clients that I could count on, right? So it's not necessarily, it wasn't given to me is what I guess what I'm.
Yeah, you still had to work for the good point, good point. And we're back to that trait of being amiable, right?
Yeah,
That sounds like
exactly.
that's how you left the companies, that's how you work with your clients, that's how you work with your partners, right? Everything's amiable and it needs to work for everybody. So
Easy going.
easy going. Okay. Well, Carl, I sure enjoyed getting to know you better. I love doing these interviews when I already know someone pretty well, and then I get even more insight into who they are. So thank you for sharing. We do need to start wrapping up though. So I have two closing questions. The first is, when you look back at your career and I guess at your life, what do you think served you best in terms of, like a characteristic, a strength, a discipline, a habit? What served you best?
Yeah, early on, my dad, just some of the early life lessons, but sort of not crying over spilled milk. I use that a lot, and I think that serves me. And maybe it's part of my amiable, personality now, is just I move on, don't get too frustrated. And I think everything, in life, that you learn is just another step forward. So I do, as an introvert, like we talked about, I do move forward and in a fairly positive way. So that no crying over spilt milk and doing the work and just moving on was something that was instilled in me early on, and I believe that's a habitual thing for me. So
Yeah, yeah. It's a great lesson. I think I remember one of our networking events at Strategic Connections was we were supposed to talk about like our epic failures and what we learned from it. And I thought our group kind of went, you know what, we don't like the word failure. We like the word learning opportunities, right? And I know that's kind of a cliche thing, but you can choose how you will look at things, right? And early on in our interview, you talked about the word perspective, and it seems like that's a great perspective to have, right? Is these aren't failures, they're learning, and how do you move on and just move forward versus spiraling downward, etc. So
yes, for sure, for sure.
okay, so last wrap up question then is, do you have any words of wisdom that really impacted you at a time when maybe you were trying to make a tough decision or you felt stuck or scratchy? Words of wisdom.
Yeah, so I have three kids that play sports, and I would give them inspirational texts before every game, match, whatever they're doing for the day. And I still do. And one of the things, and I don't know where I got this from, to be honest. I made it a thing for myself. I never tell them good luck. Not on a test, not in a sporting event. And this is just my own opinion, and like I said, I don't think I got it from anywhere, and other than maybe some of the childhood experiences. But I believe in what I tell them, and what I believe in myself is hard work and luck aren't, to me, they're not related. I love to consider luck and faith something that I think about, because I am a person of faith, but I never express that. I always say, hey, work hard. So all my inspirational quotes to my kids are, hey, have a great day, work hard, have a good game. But I've never said that. And my daughter called me out on it. She's like, you never say good luck. And I said, well, I hope it's not about luck when you're about to take a test or when you're about to compete. It shouldn't be about luck. So I mean, if I had to leave anything, that's my own thought. I don't know a quote around it. There is a quote that I share with my kids all the time, which is an Arthur Ashe quote, which is start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I love that because I feel like that's the no crying over spilled milk, right? I think that expresses it, like, hey, sometimes you gotta, you've been given lemons, make lemonade, do what you can with what you got. And I love that perspective, because we're all in those situations sometimes where you're like, this isn't ideal, but I'm going to get out of it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And then that whole start where you are thing is so powerful, because everybody's starting in a different spot, and they've been given different choices and advantages in life, and at
Right.
different times you're going to be on the ground, and other times you're going to be ahead of the game. So wow. Well, Carl, thank you so much. I love that. I'm not sure how I'm going to translate that into the quote. I think I'll use the Arthur Ashe quote. But I also love your thing about, with sports, it isn't about luck. It's about all the preparation and sports or tests, or I guess life too. It's about the hard work and the preparation. So,
Agreed.
so on that note, we'll kind of wrap up here. So listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be notified when other interviews are published. If you have any questions for me or for Carl, you can find this interview on my website, lifestorycurator.com, under the blog section. And I'll also put Carl's social media information on there as well, so you can reach out to him. And on that note, I'll say stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing those stories. Have a great day.
Thank you, Kathy.